The January 11th meeting, that's the date, isn't it? Yeah. The January 11th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Jamie Finch, and I'll be your chair tonight. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, we will have some members attending in person and others by computer or phone. For meeting attendees attending remotely, please state your name each time before speaking. If joining, mute your microphone, and when not speaking, we'll get some help. Maybe if I miss you, for anyone that's participating, Stacy's always your best bet to get looped in if I've missed a comment. For commissioners in person, please, as we always do, tilt your name card to indicate the desire to speak. And then for major items, we will try to summarize agreement. Please feel free to chime in if there's anything that you feel I've missed or mischaracterized on that. I think with that, we can probably get to attendance. Stacey, if you could help with that, that'd be great.
Great. Tom Anderson.
Here.
Madangi Ramanathan. Let's see her. Nancy Davidson. Here. Jamie Finch.
Here.
Cameron Fisher.
Yeah.
Rishi Hazra. Really shortly.
That's
We can come back.
As if on cue.
Yeah.
Here.
Lara Labeco. I believe she was going to join us remotely. We'll check back in. Ashwin Malappuram. We'll go back to Rishi Hazra.
Here.
Don McWilliams.
Here.
And Newcomb. Yeah, she should be joining us shortly. And then Janet Wall. Here. Right.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Do we have any members of the public signed up to speak, or members? Do we have anyone joining us here? Do we have anyone remotely?
We do have some members of the public.
Okay, well, maybe given that we have some members of the public, I'll start with some general guidelines. If you would like to make public comments, please raise your virtual hand. To do this, if you're on a phone, press *3. If you join by computer or smartphone, look for the hand icon. This can vary by device. If someone does indicate, we'll make sure that you have about 5 minutes is the general guideline. We obviously value public comment as part of the public process. So with that, Stacey, anyone indicated a desire to speak?
I am not seeing any hands raised or any comments in the chat. If you would like to speak, you can go ahead and send a chat to the host, just indicating you'd like to speak. Maybe while we're waiting to see if anyone else would like to speak, I just did want to acknowledge that we did receive some written comments on Title 18 materials from Connie Marsh. There were comments on connection to the shoreline master plan update, technical review process, and then overall comments on the materials. And I am not seeing anyone indicating interest in speaking.
Okay, thank you, Stacey. I think with that, then we can move on to approval of the minutes. Are there any comments on the minutes from the previous meeting? No, then those are approved by unanimous consent. And now I believe we will be moving into our standard agenda items, amendments to rules and regulations being the first item up on the list. Oh, sorry, we were going to do, you write it in pencil and I forget it. We're going to do some introductions. So I'll hand it over to Stacy for that.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Just really quickly, I wanted to introduce folks in person to Billy Almanza, the sustainability intern. You've seen Billy virtually, but he wanted to attend today to have a chance to meet you all. And then also wanted to introduce David Reedy. David started last Tuesday as the sustainability coordinator. So David will be providing some support to the environmental board, and then he's doing full immersion right now, but likely we'll start to work a little bit more on our internal municipal operations. But we'll be providing some support to the board going forward as well. So I don't know if you want to spend 1 or 2 minutes, just doing a quick introduction of yourself and background.
Sure. Hello, everyone. As Stacy said, my name's David. So I'm from the Boston area, and I most recently was working with the Government Accountability Office here in their Seattle office, doing auditing work on federal programs in a variety of different fields. But I do have a background in a wide range of environmental work. I lived and worked in Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 3 years, where I worked to expand equitable access to environmental education. I've done work in statewide solar renewable energy in Massachusetts, land conservation and urban sustainability there. I did a short stint as an intern working with the US Embassy in Stockholm on some international environmental work. So I've kind of done a broad range of things as well. Here in Seattle, I've also worked with front and centered on transportation justice policy work. So I'm super excited to be here at Issaquah, working on a range of sustainability issues. It's great to meet you all, and I'm happy to chat with each and every one of you on all things environmental here. So just reach out if you ever have any questions.
Thank you, David, and thanks for taking it as well. All right, now we will move into our standard agenda items, amendments to rules and regulations.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Tisha Geezer, City Clerk again. It's nice to be with you again this month. So at your last meeting, at your December meeting, we talked about this virtual attendance policy. I brought forward a proposed, a draft policy for you to discuss, and you had some input. I know a few of you were not in attendance at that meeting, but the input received by those who were in attendance was, an appreciation for the ability to attend virtually, the flexibility that offered, the opportunity to not need to drive into meetings, and the positive environmental impact that has in reducing those trips. But there was also some recognition that there is value to attending meetings in person and having that dynamic that is really hard to replicate completely in the virtual environment. A majority of the board members at that meeting spoke in support of reducing that quorum requirements. The proposed policy had said that a quorum of your board, which in your case is 5 members, would need to be in person for every meeting. And then others who wish to attend virtually could request permission by reaching out to Stacy, and she would help confirm that 5 could attend. The emphasis was really on having you at the meeting in person. So a majority expressed support for reducing that number down from 5, with a few of you saying that you thought that 5 was reasonable. So tonight you have before you the policy with a few changes. Gratefully, I was able to connect with Stacy before putting this material in your packet, and we talked through, this was our best effort to honor the input you provided, and also have a policy that's not too administratively tedious. So a few of the changes, no minimum requirement for in-person attendance, but strong language saying that the board strives for a quorum of the board to be in attendance in person, and a requirement that over the course of a year in your term, and board member terms start May 1 and April 30, that you would attend at least half of the board's meetings in person. So again, just a strong emphasis, but less focus on the exact number needed in person at any given meeting. Also, instead of needing permission to attend virtually, we softened it to say that we'd like you to notify Stacy. It's helpful for her to know. Tonight, as unfortunately we've had happen a few times, we were having some technical issues, so it's helpful to know if any board members were expected virtually, because that impacted, the amount of time and the staff we might call in to help ensure we can get the equipment working robustly. So let's see here. So took away the minimum requirement, took away the need for permission, instead requesting just a notification. Also removed the 5-day advance notice. So the notification could conceivably be, the day before the meeting saying I'll be attending virtually. We would appreciate as much advance notice as possible, but did remove that requirement. I think I've covered the main changes that were really all within that new section 5, and those were shown in red line, literally in red, in your agenda packet. So tonight, I did include a proposed motion in the staff report. As a reminder, these changes regarding virtual attendance and acknowledging the virtual meetings of the environmental board would be made to your rules and regulations, which the board adopts. Adoption of the rules and any changes to them requires a majority of the full board, so that means 5 of you need to vote in support of any changes. And upon offering a motion tonight and hopefully adopting the proposed amendments in this form or in a changed form, if anyone has amendments to propose, I'll then modify your rules and regulations and have the chair and vice chair sign those and post them to the website. So that is the goal of this item, and I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Tricia. So I think now, looks like we have our first comment from Nancy.
Sorry, I apologize for missing the last meeting, but it just had to happen. But I do have a question more for Stacy than anything else. And if you look at section 5A, it talks about the virtual meeting platform and equipment needs to be available at the scheduled meeting time and location prior to us notifying you. So can I request that you put that on the agenda so that we know if it's going to be, I mean, we assume it will be here and the equipment will be here, but the intent is to have that available so when we notify you, we don't have that question. It doesn't need to be, I'm not proposing a change here, I'm proposing a change to our agendas.
And I can actually answer that, Nancy. So the environmental board is one of the boards that the city has committed to having an ongoing virtual component. As I shared at the last meeting, that was initially primarily intended to allow the public and staff to attend remotely, but with this policy and based on input, we'd like to expand that. And actually, as part of one of the rule changes proposed tonight in these amendments is a statement in your rules saying that the regular meetings of the environmental board will be held both in person and virtually. So the that caveat is there mostly because what the rules don't commit to and what the city is not committing to at this point is if you have a special meeting. So say you want to have a meeting at a park or a city facility, some sort of tour or a social gathering at a restaurant or, park or someone's backyard, I suppose. Those are the type of meetings we're not going to commit to having virtual, or even possibly a joint meeting with another board, depending on the facility you are using. So you can expect as a member that all of your regular meetings that are held, the first Wednesday of the month will have that component unless you're otherwise notified.
Well, I appreciate that response. I still think it would be great to have it on, if it's a joint agenda, whatever agenda that you're expecting environmental board meetings members to participate in, if you notify us if there will be virtual, even if it's at a park. No virtual or some kind of words that says you have to attend in person to be counted as present.
Yep, I think we can do that, just it'd only be in those circumstances where we can't do a virtual meeting. Yep, I think we can do that.
All right, any other comments or questions on the proposed updates? All right, are there any motions hanging out there somewhere?
Gotta find it.
Dan?
Here's some.
Right, Dan Hitz here, proposed the motion, hopefully I'm doing this right, but I move to amend the environmental board rules and regulations by adopting amendments to section 1, regular meetings, section 3, quorum, section 6, participation, and the new section 5, virtual attendance as proposed.
we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. I believe now if there's any discussion of the motion, this would be the time for that to occur. All right. I think now then we would have Stacy take us through a roll call vote.
All those in favor of the motion and approving the amendments to the environmental board rules and regulations, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Laura, did you want to vote?
I figure out if I could. Yeah, I'm with everyone. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Me
Motion-
too. Can you see me? I'm just double
Yes.
checking to see if you guys, okay, awesome. I'm a yes too.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
Great. Motion passes and work with the clerk's office to make the amendments to the board's rules and regulations.
Great. Thank you, Tisha. Do you
Thank
need
you.
anything else from us?
No, thank you
All right, well,
very
thank
much.
you. All right, I think with that, then, I think Stacy's gonna do a bit of an introduction for the next agenda item, Title 18 complete draft clarifying questions.
Great. I just wanted to introduce this topic. Minnie is here essentially to answer clarifying questions on your initial review of the Title 18 complete draft. We also have some additional staff on the line tonight. We had a pretty extensive discussion with the department staff at our last meeting to talk through the changes that had been made based on environmental board feedback or those that had not been made and reasoning for that. They also walked us through the updated draft document and the structure of it. So tonight, really not looking necessarily for feedback, but any clarifying questions for me as in the team as you all continue with your review of Title 18. We'll go over the next steps again at the end of this agenda item, but what we are going to be asking you to do is over the next 2 weeks, continue that review and document your recommendations, concerns. We will take those written concerns and recommendations and compile them into a letter, a draft letter for council. The board will then meet February 1st to review and hopefully finalize that draft letter so that we could submit it ahead of council review of Title 18. So those are the next steps. We'll revisit them again after conversation with Minnie and her team. Anything you want to share, Minnie, to start?
For capturing that, yeah, on December, on last meeting, it was December 14th, I think. Yeah, we missed a few of you, but I think there was a quorum and we kind of walked through all the great feedback that we received from you throughout the process. And you had submitted your written comments to council, so we provided a response to those in your packet. We also told you where the consolidated draft is and highlights of the changes since the last time you saw it. So we're happy to answer any particular topic that you're interested in and get into that. In terms of the next steps for this item, we have a Planning and Policy Commission meeting tomorrow where we're kind of walking them through the structure of the new consolidated code and the policy questions that we've teased out based on the feedback that we received. And then there'll be 3 public hearings each Thursday for the remainder of January and the first Thursday in February will be when they'll be receiving the public comments on the consolidated draft. And then we'll capture their formal recommendation, which they're required to give a formal recommendation to council under the state law and under our rules on any development regulations to the council committee. We have been checking in with the council committee after each of the 6 individual subtopic areas. So if you remember, we had divided it into 6 buckets and you all had feedback on the natural element and environment, critical areas, steep slopes and all that kind of stuff. And then also the landscape and portion and the tree regulations. But beyond that, there was other process procedures, zoning and uses, and other development standards. So we've been checking in with, after each public hearing that the Planning and Policy Commission had, to go back with the council committee to see, is there anything else beyond what we've asked? Do you want the Planning and Policy to consider any additional questions? So we've had multiple checkpoints. We've had really good feedback from this particular board on a lot of topics. And your fingerprints are all over the environmental regulations here. So thank you for all your time, energy, enthusiasm, and all of that. We're happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you, Minnie. All right. Now, if there's any- go ahead, Nancy.
I apologize, but.
I can come up.
Yeah, it'd be great to
Yeah.
have you up here at the
Yeah.
table joining us, because we appreciate that. So I want to thank you very much for all your efforts on this, but I'm still reviewing, to be honest.
We don't want
And here's I have a couple of challenges that I'd like to see if you can help me with. Suppose I had a single-family home located along Issaquah Creek, and I want to add 20 feet of impervious area because I want to put in a patio or I want to expand something. Well, I have to do all the critical areas reviews and all those studies because I'm inside a critical area. Well, I have to do all of those reports just to add a small amount of impervious area to my property. I think I do. And that's a lot of studies for a single family homeowner to have to do, but is that an accurate reading of what I see here?
We have in our non-conforming, there is a section where a little bit of an exemption for single-family homeowners, where you don't have to do the critical area study. Let me get my computer and I can get to the specifics of where that is. So, for instance, if you're not really, adding any impervious surface, for instance, you would be exempt, obviously. If you had a deck and you're replacing it and maintaining it, that would be exempt. The issue with adding impervious surface, you probably will need to, but let me just confirm. We also have Doug Yormick and Dan, if they remember.
So while you're thinking about that one, I'm gonna offer you scenario number 2 that goes with it. I own a business in town that's located along the creek. And it burned down. You might know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Let's say it's right along the creek. Can I rebuild it in place and not have to do all the critical area studies and all that stuff?
Correct, there's a time limit, so if you apply for your permits within a year or something like that, then you don't have to meet the new buffers, you still have to meet the new building code
Right.
regulations and all that kind of stuff, but as far as the stream buffer,
And critical areas and all that stuff that
correct.
goes with it.
Correct.
Sorry, I just had a couple of scenarios that I'm struggling with as I read it and can't figure out how to get my arms around that piece.
Yeah, we've teased out that one particular question about the homeowners and how onerous it can be for some additional policy discussion, and laid out some pros and cons in the Planning and Policy Commission's packet. You'll see that, for the next meeting coming up. And really, they're obviously the best available science is a certain, that you have to maintain within reason if the intended goal is to get additional, shading of the stream or that, can we have the homeowner spend money in doing that instead of going through and producing these reports? The problem then becomes, how do we monitor that those plants do well over a long period of time? It's gonna depend on the homeowner to make sure that they're watered, they're kept up and all that kind of stuff. And so ecology has found that anytime you do these kind of things, it's hard for long-term, that you're going to end up degrading your environment over the long haul if you do this on a large scale in a lot of places. So where's that fine line of getting that? That's one of the questions we're sort of asking.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Mindy. I have a couple questions. One of them was just around maybe using Nancy's model as as another way to look at this. So say we have a property in central or in Old Town, and it's a single family tree canopy. So for that aspect, someone's doing a major redevelopment, or I mean, maybe it's an empty lot. I think redevelopment is probably a better example. Can you just walk us through the process of identifying whether they can support the canopy requirements that are for that given area, and like how the decision process would be made between on-site versus tree bank, other options? Just want to make sure I understand how we think that'll work in practice.
Yeah, I know Dan is online. I will let him kind of get into the details of the tree canopy, calculations. But in general, there are three things with tree regulations. One is the tree preservation, if you have an existing tree, that kind of thing. And then we have a tree density requirement that at a minimum, you have to meet these density requirements. And then we have replacement regulations of where they can be planted and how many and what's the ratio for what you better take on. So the first attempt would be to figure out what is your existing canopy and what are you doing. In your hypothetical example, if there are existing trees, is there an attempt to preserve the existing old growth trees, or if they're really, not very good trees and they're dying, and then probably it's a different kind of a test, because they're not going to be mature trees for a long period of time. So is it better to start off and plant new trees? And so that sort of assessment happens with the tree preservation. And then under the existing code, you just had the number of trees, the caliper. It wasn't based off of the canopy coverage. So if you kept two really small ones, you met that standard, as opposed to the larger trees with the canopy. For tree preservation, I think that's one of the issues. Dan, do you want to fill in and answer Jamie's question?
Sure. So you mentioned the possibility of, or a scenario where somebody's redeveloping in Old Town, right? So we actually have, you submit an application and we have retention requirements. So you're going to, in this hypothetical situation, you're going to tell us how many caliper inches of significant trees you have on site. And part of that requirement is going to be that you retain a minimum of 35% of the total caliper that's already on site. Now, Old Town also, you're also going to have to meet the canopy requirements. And for Old Town, that's 33%. Now, if the 35% retention of the total caliper inches also gives you the 33% or more of canopy coverage, then you're going to be good. But if for some reason that 35% doesn't provide you with enough canopy, then you're going to provide replacement trees, and we're going to project those trees out for 20 years. And that will be essentially the extent of the tree preservation code as being applied to your hypothetical project.
Thanks, Daniel. And I think part of what I'm curious about is, I think there's also the potential that if someone's unable to meet the requirement, and I want to make sure I understand what not being able to, what are the scenarios that someone would end up not filling that requirement on site, and would have basically some sort of mitigation occurring elsewhere through the tree fund, or I can't remember the exact name, but.
Yeah, I think a single family development is probably the least likely to need to plant off-site or pay into a tree fund. I think we're probably looking at commercial properties that in an area that has a higher impervious surface allowance. I think those are the situations in which folks may not be able to plant on site where it may not be feasible. For family home, you have impervious surface requirements in most of the city, setbacks. So there's going to be more space to have trees. Commercial development in central Issaquah, where you have a higher impervious surface allotment and not as restrictive setbacks, those are probably going to be the situations in which somebody may not be able to achieve canopy on site.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. And then I thought I saw the number, I know this is not a final number, but that roughly for, I don't know what size of tree this was, the cost would be roughly $700. Is that accurate and maybe it would be helpful to understand kind of what that size at 20 years, what that actually looks like?
I'm sorry, 700, what is the cost?
Yeah, because I thought there was and I know there was, I can't remember if it was in the memo or where it was, but I remember seeing a number, just an estimate at this point for what that potential mitigation cost would be for a single tree.
Sure. So the projection, that 20-year projection doesn't really play into it. The I believe what you're referring to is there's not as part of this code, but as part of doing redoing our land use fees in the future, a recommendation to adopt a tree replacement fee of about $750. And so what that means is if you can't plant on site, can't find a place to plant off site, then your third and final option is to pay into the tree, and the payment into that tree account per tree is currently proposed to be around $700 to $750, and that's per tree, and that's supposed to cover the cost of purchasing a tree, maintaining the tree, installing the tree. And maintenance is typically you're looking at like the first 3 years.
Okay, that's
And
helpful.
after all, attempts have been made to meet those standards on site, then in those legitimate, cases, you could. I mean, the $750 will have to keep up with inflation and all those kind of things, but, and monitoring. I think the bigger issue with the off-site tree planting is also going to be, a 3-year monitoring period, so until the tree is established, it's not just you plant and walk away. So there's going to be other things as part of the replacement. It's much easier to get it planted on your site.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that may not be possible.
Okay, thank you. I think my last question is just related to one of the responses I got back. First of all, thank you for all the responses that on my questions via email. The one thing that I did want to just mention one more time is around the buffer averaging for a wetland that could be applied by the director. And I just want to make sure that that's something that could never be necessarily influenced by someone like a developer. That's something that's purely at the discretion, or like the situation you mentioned where it's saving a stand of trees. That's the only scenario that could be used. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct, and we can beef up the language if you think that the language needs to be, but we've taken out the standard, anyone can apply for a buffer reduction and reduce it by 25% or a buffer averaging, blanket buffer averaging provision. It's only if there's an actual situation where you're trying to preserve old growth trees and it may, in order to get that, you might get an offset. So it's an incentive for something that greater good would come from sort of a scenario. But Yeah, we're happy to take any suggestions in the language there if you think.
Thank you, Minnie. No, that's helpful. Stacy, I saw you.
I had a process comment. We were having some issues with the WebEx we now have a member of the public here. So just at the time you deem appropriate, if we could open back up for public comment.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just finish out any questions from the board and then we can move to public comment after that.
Yeah, I have some responses to the earlier question, on the critical area study. So what's in the draft, it hasn't changed from our existing code, is the director can waive the requirement for projects related to existing.
What section are you on?
I am on 18.802.
Sorry, Minnie.
18.802, 400. And it is F.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So basically for single family homes, if there's no alteration to the critical area or its buffer, and it's not going to affect the critical area in a manner contrary to the city's goals, the minimum standards required by this chapter are met, and then, you do a study. So this could imply if you have a house that's in the buffer, but you want to expand on the other side of the house, which is way beyond the required buffer. I see Connie shaking her head that, I will, when it comes time to take her comments, she can clarify. But that's how I read it. That's the number F is, there is currently in the code some discretion for the director for single family homeowners when a critical area study is required. But obviously, if you're within the buffer, you're impacting the buffer, then we would potentially want to know where the edge is. A lot of times what happens practically is people don't know until they have a wetland biologist come and take those soil samples and everything else to know exactly where where the edge is. So to a human eye, it may just look like, oh, it's not a wetland, but it has to have all three characteristics, and it could be a wetland. So that's where the fine line between when the regulations become too onerous, when they're meant to protect the environment.
Can I just ask a follow-on question to what you just said?
Mhm.
So you said it gets referred to the director. Do you anticipate there's several sections here that say, it's at the discretion of the director. Do you anticipate each of those items actually coming to you, or will you delegate that authority to someone else?
We would, it depends. What we've tried to do with this code update is we've added criteria for the director to approve. So whoever is in the director's shoes can evaluate that proposal and come to the same conclusion based on those 5 criteria, so there's some consistency and expectation that it is, and direction involved. But yes, I think we delegate it to staff and then make a recommendation, but ultimately the decision has to be signed by the director.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Great, Nancy. Any other questions? All right, well, then maybe we can reopen public comment. Reopen public comment, and Stacey, if you have Connie that may want to provide a public comment?
Yes, please. Do I need to get closer to the camera, or am I okay over here?
Yeah, you might want to come up. I'm not sure how well they'll pick up, if you don't mind. Either you can sit at the table, or we have the podium up too. What do you prefer?
I can just weave. I spent 4 hours with my mom looking for the right coffee filter, so this is just fitting in my day. Sorry about that. I was not getting in, and I had to dive into the car and drive here. My name is Connie Marsh, and you have gotten hopefully helpful emails from me on Title 18 because you got 700 pages of stuff to look at and supposedly make reasonable comment. The reason I was shaking my head at Minnie's comments is is because our test sample of legal non-conforming use house, which was the conversation, adding out over the impervious surface is still in the buffer. And so in the language that they added, you would still have to do the critical area studies because there's nothing waived for anything that's in the buffer, because anything you would add that's in the buffer, they would take as an impact, even if it's over existing impervious. And so that will still require critical area studies, given the exact language that is in the code. Now, my biggest issue so far is the intent seems to be to protect the critical areas better. The language and the details of the language are not easily read, conflicting, not seemingly well organized, and to my particular brain, unlikely to be able to use easily and effectively as a tool to protect the environment. So I can make comments. I don't have to just ask questions like you guys. So my suggestion would be a technical edit. I know everybody is trying in the city to do that, but they also have other jobs. But making a code that actually can work and not make everyone crazy, I think is very hard and not a part-time job. So I would like to see that happen, especially on the way that the Fish and Wildlife Conservation habitat area interfaces with streams and wetlands. It just does not work. Nobody would be able to read that and understand what they had to do. And I don't think staff as a whole would understand that either. The other thing is you have an odd number of, I'm not going to call them deviations. You have deviations in the code, and then you have exemptions, and then you're going to have exceptions. And then throughout this code language, you find things like, well, you should be able to do compensatory mitigation in a stream. Now, why would you want to take flood water and dig a hole in a stream and put your flood water there? It says you can take down a 12-inch tree in order to be able to do LID in a stream buffer or a wetland buffer. It doesn't refer to your critical area studies. It does not refer to the tree code in any exacting way. So you have these little built-in conflicts that makes it so that that person's going to be able to take down that 12-inch tree because they don't have any other place to put it. So I thought it was illuminating listening to Daniel say, in these higher impervious surface areas, it is likely that we will say that they do not have a place to plant those trees. So why, if your code says you have to plant the trees, should the impervious surface allowance make it so that you don't have to? Who wins? Who decides that? How do you decide that? And I don't think that the criteria provided are giving enough definition so that you can make those decisions appropriately and consistently is imperative. So this is more of a rant because you guys have gotten enough from me, but this is my perception of your chapters. And if I don't know how else to be helpful to you in reading code, because I think it's particularly hard reading. But if you follow the flow of the technical studies and see if they're going to get you what you want, and you try to follow them through and make your own little project up in your brain and see if you yourself can get an answer, I think that's gonna tickle a lot of questions for you. If you have the time, do you have the energy, can you stand it? Will it drive you to drink? Probably, but I would ask you to try to put your energy into it, because unless we get good code, we will not be able to protect our environment, because this is the rule. This is the only tool that we have to make developers protect our land and our environment. So if you can stand to, please, please, please do. I beg. Ooh, I begged. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Connie. I think with that, unless, I don't believe we have any other public comments, I may quickly reopen for any clarifying questions on Title 18 to see if any came to mind for anyone.
I can give one more citation of the code for 18.214.070 as, number C4B is talking about when you have a non-conforming development in a stream buffer or a wetland buffer. So there, if you already have a non-conforming, you can do an expansion outside of the required wetland or stream buffers. You can add vertical stories. Building expansions over existing impervious surface is allowed as long as you don't encroach closer to the wetland or the stream. Buffer enhancement equal to the building expansion is required for building expansion over 500. So, 10 by 10, no problem, but if you're going over 500, then you have to do buffer enhancement. So it gets into some of those nuances for non-conforming structures in critical areas.
Thank you, Vinnie. Nancy, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't come up with all my questions at once, but, okay, I'm struggling with a couple other things, okay? So earlier, or sometime last year, we reviewed the shoreline master plan. And now we're reviewing the critical areas, and the two of them clearly overlap. So, and if there's a conflict between them, because I haven't really reviewed them, I don't know if you've done that to make sure that they don't conflict. Which one wins?
So the shoreline master program update includes dock lighting, updates and things like that. But the critical areas is going to be a new appendix that the new stuff that council will approve for critical areas will be the appendix that will be part of the S&P. So the stream buffers that, for fish-bearing streams of the 150 feet, that will be the same ones that will apply to the shoreline. So there potentially should not be any conflict, but there's general language in Title 18 under the very, if there is a conflict, the more stringent rules will apply.
Okay, I just want to repeat what I think I just heard you say. So there's a chapter called Critical Areas in Title 18, which I loved reading.
Yeah.
And that will be included as an appendix in the
Correct.
Shorelines Master Plan
Correct.
after these are adopted. Is that what I just heard
Yes,
you
so
say?
if you go to the S&P, link on the webpage, you'll kind of see it's an appendix and it's attached. And there are a few things that Department of Ecology does not adopt, which are exemptions. So the exemptions under the critical area do not apply as exemptions for shoreline purposes. The other one is a reasonable use exception. The critical areas code has a reasonable use exception, but shoreline is a shoreline variance, which is the final decision is made by the shoreline hearing board. So those are the two things that ecology makes us take out from the critical area code.
That helps me. Thank you. I just wanted to, I'm having a hard time putting them all together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Nancy. I had a question related to development agreements. I am not super familiar with exactly how that process looks. What aspects of Title 18, where is there wiggle, how should I ask this question? How would any of the code that would make it into Title 18, how could that be adjusted as part of a development agreement? Are there specific sections, ways that could be done, or just want to understand how that process might occur during that negotiation?
Yeah, good question. So right now, our existing code talks about development agreements, that talks about for the trend TDR, it'll do this. For this type of thing, it'll be a quasi-judicial development agreement, and then for urban villages, development agreement, there's references to that as a legislative process. So the city attorney has prepared a chapter here that to clean all of that up and really create a, say what is the process, who makes the decision on development agreements, a legislative decision made by council. And here's some of the things what you know, some criteria. So there is a chapter in the proposed draft that attempts to provide some clarity on when and how and who makes the decision and how it's processed as a legislative decision.
Okay, and then is the assumption because it's processed as a legislative decision, there's less need to legislate exactly what's going to happen because it's ultimately gonna need to pass? I'm just trying to understand, because
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but
I'm gonna-
potentially anything within this could be updated or kind of amended as part of a development agreement for that specific project.
Correct, but councils can't just enter into development agreement without a public hearing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a state law, you still have to do it in a public, you have to hold a public hearing in a development agreement, to enter into it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful, thank you. All right, any other
I'm
questions?
gonna ask one more.
Go ahead.
Well, and I appreciate your time because I missed the last meeting. I'm a little confused about some of the statements in here about utilities and their ability to remove trees and do other things in critical areas. And from what I see, they pretty much can do just about what they want, just about. And it seems to me that that doesn't meet kind of what we're trying to do with these regulations. So I'd say that that is one area that I'm particularly concerned about, and think would request, you can hear where one of my comments is coming. I mean, is there a law out there that allows PSC to come in and take down trees because it might be a power issue? Or a utility such as the sewer utility to come in and do things because they need to remove a septic tank? Just asking general questions, to see if there's some way that there can be some checks on this to make sure they're not coming in and clear cutting along power lines.
Sure, we have attempted to clean up a lot of this stuff, general blanket exemptions and things like that. And subject them to the mitigation sequencing and mitigation for, it's your last resort. Is there other ways you can do this? And so they still have to go through a few of those things. And if you cut down trees, you're still subject to replacement ratios and all of that kind of stuff. So that should be a deterrent for them to just automatically assume. But public safety for sometimes will kind of, comes into play. And if there's a snowstorm and trees are falling apart and creating a hazard, then they will need to come apart. And trees don't stay forever, right, either, so there is a life cycle that they go through. And so the idea is the ICAP, canopy coverage and all that great work has been done of establishing those goals that we're proactively replanting and keeping up with over the long haul. But if you have specifics about which exemption you're talking about, we're happy to get into those details.
So I guess the question I have is, a single family homeowner or a business has to go through a permit process. Why are we not making utilities do the same?
They have to. They have to. There's only very limited, if there's already a sewer line, can they go and maintain it if it's plugged up, a kind of thing. So yes, there's some exemptions from maintenance of existing stuff, but if you're putting up a brand new water line, whatever, you still have to go through the permitting process. If the CEPA may be required if it's over 12 inches, you have to meet the critical areas code and all that. So I'm not sure which.
Well, I was thinking more of trees specifically, you can see PSC's crews come in and do a pretty good job of cleaning canopies.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there's a permit, if they come in with it, and what I'm not seeing in the code is anything that gives the city some ability to manage that, or to at least say, come on, guys, can you do this a different way?
Sure, Dan, I don't know if you have anything specific, in terms of how the tree code, attempts to, avoid any kind of abuse of power by power companies to cut down trees.
Yeah, so you mentioned canopy cleaning. Anything that's considered excessive pruning does require permit from the city. If you're performing pruning for maintenance purposes, you do not need a utility PSC in your example. If they want to remove trees, they do have to get a permit. So long as those are significant trees, meaning that they're 6 inches DBH or greater, then they do need to get a permit and they do need to meet the approval criteria. And if they do remove, they get a permit, then they still have to replant.
And they actually, do they have that condition right now? Or is that new in the code?
If it's on a lot, I would say that it's current in the code. Now, whether they've actually submitted, if we're talking about PSC, I call it instances in which I received an actual tree permit from PSC. But I think that's a matter of having a conversation.
Are there consequences to PSC or say myself if I take a tree down without a permit?
I believe that consequences I feel like is kind of strong, but it is accurate. I think that they should be applied evenly.
Yeah, I think there are a couple ways to kind of handle, utility companies, and they have their own vegetation manual. Is how often they go in and how often, what's their vertical distance. I mean, then there's the East Coast blackout, they kind of, when the pendulum swings in one direction, it's like, could be a huge issue, we need to get ahead of it. And so sometimes they really try to be more aggressive with their pruning or maintenance schedules and so on and so forth. But it, PSC is our partner in the city for a lot of other things. So perhaps talking to them about, electric vehicle charging stations and planning for that, and the tree vegetation management. So that happens more at a permit by permit stage, but more at a collaboration and looking at where are some problem points for PSC and how can they be partners in maintaining some of the city's goals and aspirations for whether it's electric vehicle charging stations or canopy coverage goals. We can certainly, reach out and try and learn their perspective and see what they think of our code. And
Thank you.
I have a related question. It's actually kind of the opposite question in some ways. Who is actually technically responsible for maintaining, like the trees on your property? It's going into an electrical line. Who is responsible for that? Is it the utility or the homeowner?
the trees on your property, the homeowners are responsible, would be my initial reaction to it.
Okay.
If it is an easement, a lot of times it's not really clear, is it where the public right of way starts and where usually your overhead power lines should not, unless they have an easement on the private property, and usually within the right of way, so that's always a good, when you see those power poles, they usually will either have an easement on the private property owner or be in the public right of way.
Okay, so if it's in the public right of way, who's responsible? Like who would cover the cost of pruning a tree? And the tree's on my property, the tree sprouts up and over onto right of way into power lines. Who's responsible in that situation?
I mean, that depends on the easement, so if there's an overhead power line on a private property, they have to have legal rights to have that power line. Usually that easement will spell out that PSC can come in and do vegetation maintenance and they will, it'll get into the specifics of who's responsible for replacement. But, the reality, the practical aspects is if there is a danger, the utility company, and especially with this power outage and the snow, they will come and clear that off.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I'm just asking because I'm just curious I'm just thinking about some of the lots that were suggesting quite a few trees go on, that there's only limited places that those are gonna go that'll realistically end up in the public right away.
Yeah.
And we also, not at Title 18, but other places are talking about electrifying major aspects of people's homes, et cetera. So I just think there's some tension there that I want to make sure that I understand. So, okay, thank you. Thank you, Vinny. All right. Oh, Rishi.
Yeah. I was just wondering, so you mentioned that like for maintenance efforts and others, like sometimes utility companies may need like a permit for work and sometimes they wouldn't. Who would be responsible for, I guess, enforcing that? Checking whether or not they got a permit when they needed it versus not?
That would be the city is the entity that issues the permits. So if we get a complaint from someone saying, here the trees are being removed, we will send our code enforcement officer to evaluate which is the tree, whose property is it on, who's doing the tree cutting, and then we'll follow up as an enforcement action against him.
Rishi. All right. Last call for any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any, so thank you, Minnie. Thank you, everyone else from the city that joined for this. And I think with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item. So with that is going to be sewer and wastewater master plan. And I don't think you have an intro on this one, Stacy.
No, do you want me just to do a reminder of next steps for Title 18?
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so we discussed at the last meeting that we've shifted our meeting schedule around a little bit to accommodate council review. So our next meeting will be February 1st, that's a week earlier. I'm asking if folks can complete their review of Title 18 and send in comments to me by January 24th, end of day. That will give me a day or two turnaround to compile those comments into a letter, get it back out to you all. And then our February 1st meeting will be mostly focused on reviewing, revising that letter in real time so we can turn it right around. So when you submit those comments for me to incorporate in the letter, the more that you can write them as they should appear in the letter, the easier it will be for me to turn that letter around quickly. I'll send out an email to you all tonight or tomorrow, just with a reminder of that schedule. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. One other thing I'll mention is everyone keeps mentioning 700 pages for Title 18, but if you actually look at the agenda, of the topics we covered, there's not that many pages. So don't be scared by 700 pages part too much. Obviously, if you want to read the whole thing, please go ahead, but it can be cut down more than that, so.
And I'll say we're available. If you are struggling with any section, just reach out to me. I'll sit down with you and, we can't meet with you all together without the meeting notification, but a couple at a time or one at a time. If you really, sometimes it's helpful to talk through and walk through some of those sections. So don't hesitate to reach out. Let Stacy know or me know and we'll make that happen.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now we will move to the sewer and wastewater master plan. I think, Matt, will you be taking us away?
Yes, we'll hand this over to. I've made you presenter. You should be able to share your screen.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Ellis, the Utility Engineering Manager for City of Issaquah in Public Works. And I also have on the line Shannon Samara and Andrea Boyd with Mead and Hunt, and Dave Harms with BHC, and they're supporting me on this effort. So let me figure out how to share a screen, which might take. From beginning. y'all see my screen? I can't see you, so I'm gonna have to rely on your voice.
We are not seeing the presentation.
Anything yet?
Oh,
Try.
flickered. Yeah, we're still seeing.
Wait, hold on one second.
Yeah, if you have trouble, I can bring it up.
Oh, I didn't press the full button. That was the problem. I apologize.
There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. So tonight we're talking about a subset of the sewer master plan that we're developing, and that is on-site septic system management. This is a subject that we've been working on for a while now, and we are ready to present to you guys as the first step in updating some policy. So the purpose is to update the Issaquah Municipal Code for on-site septic system management and extend sewers into critical areas where needed. So here is a picture of the city with all our septic systems mapped out. Historically, we have looked at private on-site septic systems equally within the city, no matter geographically speaking. Every property containing a drain field is created equal. However, Issaquah is a city that contains unique topography. We have mountainsides and valley floors. We are at the epicenter for critical salmon-bearing streams in our region. We have areas with great percolation and areas that feed our aquifers where we get our drinking water. The city is served by two sewer purveyors. The Semimis Plateau Water and Sewer Water District provides sewer to the northeast corner of the city, and those are the yellow parcels that you see there on septic. And just to highlight that. And then the city provides sewer and manages the rest of the area. Taking these elements into account, we realize that septic systems are not created equally. The Department of Ecology has set a total maximum daily load for fecal coliforms in Issaquah Creek of 100 colonies per 100 milliliters. Since poorly maintained septic systems and aging drain fields located in close proximity to the creek are a contributor of fecal coliforms, we have a responsibility to be more proactive in managing septic systems within the city. For this reason, we are looking at septic system management from a geographic standpoint and looking at ways to make consistent and proactive inspection requirements for all properties who own septic systems. So we did a lot of data review as we started this process. We looked at the Washington Administrative Code and the RCWs. We looked at King County Board of Health, which administers septic system management in our region. We looked at our Issaquah Municipal Code, Issaquah Public Works standard operating procedures. We took a look at our on-site septic inventory within the city. That was the map that you just recently saw. And our water quality monitoring results from streams within the area. And we looked at city code for neighboring communities to see where we lied in comparison to our neighbors. So like I said, King County Board of Health code governs inspection frequencies for on-site septic systems and requirements to connect to sewer. Currently, the Board of Health Title 13 states that you need to connect to sewer if your system is within 200 feet of available public sewer, and it also stipulates inspection frequency and requirements. Our Public Works Engineering Department supplements King County Board of Health inspections with our requirements with our own on-site septic inspection program. The Board of Health does not have funding to oversee an inspection program. It relies on each municipality to do that. The applicable municipal code in 133230 has for connection requirements, distance requirements for connection to sewer, and 1380.040 contains connection waivers if the property owner elects not to connect to sewer. This waiver can be renewed every 3 years, and this is our current code. So Public Works on-site septic site evaluation surveys and maintains records of unsewered properties. It is a mouthful. We administer notices and set schedules, and the passing inspection is required to obtain a 3-year waiver from connecting to sewer. Inspections are, however, inspections petered out and was put on hold in 2019. and there's a need to overhaul and revamp this program. So why update? It's a priority of council. We discussed this in the floodplain update as a priority. King County Board of Health outlines the inspection frequencies, but does not have the funding to oversee an inspection program. And there's concerns with the current code. The on-site septic inspections are only by visual failure or triggered with sale of property, and as a bank lending requirement. However, in the housing market, many homes are purchased with cash, bypassing what has historically been one of the more reliable mechanisms to ensure an inspection occurs. This creates a lack of checks and balances to verify inspections occur and to correct problems. There's a total, and like I said, there's a total maximum daily load of fecal coliforms in Issaquah Creek set by the Department of Ecology. So our goal is to protect human health by protecting the public from waterborne illnesses, ensure water bodies are fit for beneficial and recreational uses, and protect the environment to ensure water quality, protect aquatic life, ensure water meets regulated standards, and we have a responsibility in the region to maintain water quality as our decisions can impact areas downstream from us in Lake Sammamish. Issaquah is just a piece of the puzzle. We need to be responsible water stewards for future generations. So how do we get there? We update the municipal code related to septic inspections and connection requirements, establish a more robust on-site septic management program, expand our stream monitoring program, and strategically extend sewers in critical areas to provide the opportunity to connect when the need or desire presents itself. So just to kind of very quickly run through a septic system. I'm sure everyone knows what they are, but just to kind of provide the information. A house, sewer comes out of a house and goes into a septic tank. The solids settle out and the liquids go down through a distribution box and then into the drain field where it percolates into the ground. Natural microbes in the soil digest the bad bacteria before it can enter the groundwater or enter our streams or other surface waters. However, certain times a drain field isn't working correctly, and that can happen with high groundwater, where the water prevents the microbes from doing their job. It can also occur with an impervious layer or clogged pipe, forcing the effluent into the surface, preventing it from percolating. This can also occur in older septic systems as the space around the drain field either gets compacted or clogged. And then finally, if a drain field is located too close to a critical area, and during storm events or times prone to ground saturation, the effluent mixes with our surface water. So as we look at this, we did a gap analysis. We reviewed code from neighboring cities. We reviewed 4 cities in the Puget Sound region, 1 neighboring county, and 2 cities in the greater Pacific Northwest. We identified gaps that we felt our code lacked, including inspection documentation for all on-site septic systems in the city, inspection enforcement, definitions of type of improvements allowed for septic systems, identification of when and where sewer connections are required, sewer extension requirements, and penalties for not connecting or repairing. So we did a little qualitative analysis compared to our peers, and we noticed that our current code and program, we're kind of at the bottom. We're at the least proactive. And with the measures that we want to put in place, we want to be not the most restrictive, but kind of towards the upper end, proactive. And that's part of the question that I'll be asking of you guys tonight is are we on the right track? Are we, is this the correct direction that we want to take? Do we want to be more or less proactive than decisions that we're making? So what's the existing city policies that govern this? Our comp plan it identifies the protection of quality and quantity of groundwater used for public supply. That relates to our CARA, our critical aquifer recharge area, including restricting or prohibiting land uses or activities that could potentially contaminate the aquifer recharge area in the event of an accidental spill or dumping. Our sewer comprehensive plan, and as I mentioned, we're currently updating that. The old one was made in 2002 when the city had a population of 10,000 people, and we're nearing 40. So it is in desperate need to be updated. And the new updates will include a more comprehensive an up-to-date sewer conveyance model and look at policy updates relating to not only septic systems, but our conveyance, our ability and capacity for conveying sewer through the city. And then our shoreline master plan correlates to new development, redevelopment required to connect to sewer and expanded sewer service to shoreline areas. And then our storm goal performance measures recommends existing developments to connect when on-site septic systems have failed and sewer is available. So our proposal is to develop a more robust on-site septic management program by updating the code and create a sewer extension plan into critical systems. So the program is twofold. We do on-site septic and the inspection program, it's just a big word, inventorying, properly inventory septic systems in the city, providing a more robust management program and public outreach, and then stream monitoring, increasing our stream sampling throughout the city along our major streams, and then areas with pockets of septic systems. I'll get into that in a later slide. So our strategy is, again, to identify target tiers for sewer connection, formalize on-site septic inspections, perform stream monitoring expansion, update the municipal code, and perform education and public outreach. So increase the on-site septic inspection. We need to formalize our inspection program to maintain the inventory of all on-site septic systems in the city, update inspection requirements, perform inspection management, and allow code enforcement measures for non-compliance. We do this through revisions of the code. So when we get into the code, our goal for timeline is for approval is 1 year from now. We have a few steps to get there. The inspection requirements for all systems all systems need to adhere. Requirements are in accordance with the King County Board of Health, Title 13, and we want to expand our inspection requirements. We're going to talk about frequency, definitions of types of repair allowed in sewer if sewer is available, and certified on-site septic maintainers to repair existing systems. And then we expand our inspection requirements and code enforcement. So the first code that we're looking to update is 133230. And we would require a connection if sewer is available within 200 feet. And that's in line with the King County Board of Health. Our current code states to connect to sewer if available fronting of property. So the main revision here would be that if sewer is available within 200 feet, you would need to connect, not if it's right at your back door. And then the connection waivers. This code revision stipulates that if an on-site septic system is located within 200 feet of sewer, they're allowed to continue to use their existing system if they apply for a connection waiver. This requires an inspection every 3 years for gravity system and proposing every 1 year for a pump system in line with King County Board of Health. In addition, as part of the code revisions, we wanted to clarify what types of improvements are allowed. If a property is located adjacent to sewer, our goal is not to make this an onerous issue. And if a system is working adequately or needs minor improvements, we are fine with them continuing to use their system. We allow minor repairs in line with the King County Board of Health. And that is maintaining the septic box, repairing baffles, pump alarms, things like that. However, an extension waiver would not be allowed for a major repair, such as replacing the drain field or the septic tank altogether. Waivers would also not be allowed for non-conforming systems, typically a drain field that is too small for the house that it serves. Any system that is in failure, meaning the subsurface soil absorption system isn't working. A remodel that would change the amount of use to the system. And again, we are proposing this if sewer is available within 200 feet. If sewer is unavailable due to topography or further than 200 feet away, we would still allow repair or replacement of a drain field. Waivers do not apply in this situation. We would also allow remodels that require an expansion of a drain field as long as the septic system is working properly. So then we get to the violation part. And we would, repairs or replacement of septic systems are required as soon as possible. That's one of the things we want. We also want to verify a failure through a dye test to make sure a system isn't contaminating surface waters. A dye test would only be required if a system is reported or suspect of failure. And then failed septic systems will be reported to the King County Health Department. Again, this is what is done, but now codifies the process. And the final point, I skipped the page, is penalty. And we have not completely evaluated this portion. We will do so at our next touch point with the Policy and Planning Commission. And this element requires additional, we just need a little bit of additional evaluation as we go through this. The goal is to have some measure of enforcement if a system is not conforming, but not so onerous that it creates undue hardships for the property owner. We don't want to red tag anyone. We just want the ability for people to connect if they need to. And we want to ensure that connections are being made. This element will be identified prior to presentation at the next. So I'm not going to read through this. This is kind of what we went through, but this is currently where we're at. We're in the least proactive side of things, and we evaluated less proactive, and more proactive options. And our goal is to be kind of in the middle, be a little more proactive than we are currently. And again, I can read these for you later at a later date. It's very small text, but I just wanted to kind of explain that our goal in our qualitative assessment is to be more proactive in our code updates. The second step, as I mentioned, is stream sampling. We are expanding our stream sampling program over the next 1 to 2 years. The data collection and analysis is currently ongoing. We are collecting samples in all our major streams at the headwater or start of the city, and then in pockets of septic areas where sewer is not available. And this will support the evaluation of septic system functionality, as well as issues with our current system and potential other sources of contamination, like dog parks and other places where contamination could occur. We're also allowing for field inspections and investigating complaints as they come in. So here's a map of where we are doing the sampling at the moment. These are, again, on Issaquah Creek primarily, and then also Tibbetts Creek and a few of the other creeks, North Fork and Parkville Creek. So the sewer extension program, our goal is to extend sewers within critical areas. This is the third step of this process. Our goal is to extend sewers into critical areas, such as the floodplain, shoreline, stream buffers, wetlands, high groundwater, and critical area recharge areas. We're proposing a tiered program where extensions would be prioritized based on the critical area that it impacts. So tier 1 is the 100-year floodplain, shoreline buffer boundary, and commercial industrial properties. Under this proposal, we are suggesting no new on-site septic systems in this area moving forward. And our goal for timeline to extend sewers to these properties is 20 years. And this would impact 89 properties within the city. And so this is the dark blue swath is our shoreline, and the septic systems that are the properties that are on septic that are in orange or yellow that overlay that are the ones that would be impacted. Tier 2 is other stream buffers outside of our shoreline area, wetland boundaries, and documented areas with high groundwater. Again, no new on-site septic systems moving forward. And our goal for extension would be 30 years for all these areas, these properties. And the properties that would be impacted is about 41. And this one's a little harder to read, but it's there are additional streams that are outlined in like a beige, and then our properties that would be impacted.
Matt, question for you.
Yeah, of course.
Do we have another map that also shows, because presumably some of the existing unsewered parcels are within 200 feet. Do we have any that any map that shows kind of the split between those already within 200 feet versus not, or kind of sense for difficulty for these properties?
That's a good question. We have that on our GIS network, but we haven't identified that yet. That's part of the next step, is to evaluate the cost for these, and I'll get to that because that is the critical next step in this process, is to figure out the cost implications for this. So then the final tier is the critical area recharge, critical aquifer recharge area, or CARA. And we're proposing this in the 1 to 10 year. No new on-site septic systems, and the goal is to extend sewers within 40 years. And this would impact 15 properties. And again, this one isn't pertaining to fecal coliforms, but more emergent contaminants. Not knowing kind of what is going to be coming down the pipeline for new chemicals that we need to be watching out for, but we just don't want those in our aquifers. And so removing on-site septic systems within a reasonable time period feels like it would be at least a proactive measure to prevent new chemicals from entering our aquifer where we receive our water. And again, the purple is current CARA that is being revised as we speak, but there's just a few properties outside tier 1 and tier 2 that would be impacted. So there's thresholds that would trigger the need for a sewer extension, including but not limited to location within a priority tier areas defined in the OSS management program, will be added to our CIP. So that's part of the next step that you're mentioning, is that we will develop a CIP, figuring out the cost for these and figuring out where the biggest pockets are. We also overlay that with our stream sampling to see where if we're seeing a lot of fecal coliforms pop up in and around these neighborhoods. Also, locations in areas with groups of 5 or more homes where there's a 30% failure rate, or where at least 50% of property owners desire connection to the sewer system. So this leads to, yep, go ahead.
Matt, this is Nancy Davidson. Do you have areas where property owners trying to hook up to the sewer system and don't have it available?
Yes, I do.
So you're actually hearing from residents wanting to hook to the sewer?
That's correct. And we're trying, again, it's the biggest issue, and that'll be the next slide, is funding, because it's the one of the bigger elephants in the room for this element. And then I guess the other major thing is redevelopment. If an area is being redeveloped, changed from one type of use to another, then sewer obviously need to be connected at that point. So we did look at funding alternatives, because this is a challenge. We're not quite there yet in terms of finding a final solution. This has to be a decision for the council. But we've looked at utility local improvement districts. Costs are distributed by property owner at the time of extension. Funded by city with recuperation. So basically, the city funds the sewer, and then at the time of connection, the homeowner pays their portion for that extension. Funded by the city with no recuperation. The city funds the sewer, and the cost is borne by the ratepayers, or a cost share, kind of a combination of those lower two bullets. Sewer extensions are expensive. These are hugely impactful to property owners. Additionally, unsewered neighborhoods typically exist for a reason, encompassing challenges for connections, especially along the valley floor, where all of the unsewered areas exist near critical areas. We are pursuing opportunities in our standards to reduce costs for connections and make accommodations in areas where gravity sewers are not feasible due to topographic constraints. The next step is to identify costs for extensions in tier 1 and place those extensions in the capital improvement plan. So like I said, we're still kind of in that preliminary process. We wanted to get to you guys to see if the approach that we're pursuing is a good one. And then as we do that, we'll develop the costs and start to figure out the impacts. The tiered approach is not to force connection. That's what I want to reiterate, but to provide the opportunity to hook up when the need presents itself. We identify a need within the prioritized tier and extend sewers within the capital improvement plan. Connection is not required unless the system is shown to be in failure per the aforementioned inspection protocol or upon desire. The options shown are standard mechanisms for sewer extensions utilized by other municipalities in our region, and we will be debating on these topics. The city is evaluating options for funding alternatives with the desire to make a fair and equitable partnership with impacted property owners. And the goal is to find a mechanism that facilitates extensions and reduces risks without creating an undue burden on those impacted, while also not creating a huge impact on existing ratepayers. The next step in this process will be evaluating options and bringing staff recommendations to the Planning and Policy Commission. So, public outreach and education. That'll be that's another part of this policy is to explain to the public what we're doing. Tell them about the code change information, CIP planning, and on-site septic information and inspection resources. Also provide links to our water quality that we're doing and any education that would come out of it. We'll provide information on our website, mailers to impacted property owners who are on septic. And then as we get down the line, have open houses for each extension when the time comes. Again, the timeline is 1 year from now to get these code updates. So here's a time and next steps. We're at the green dot at the very beginning, present to you guys. The next step is to present to the Planning and Policy Commission and then to Council. We'll also be presenting at the same time, another time, the overarching sewer master plan with some additional policy updates. I did not want to combine the two because I figured it was too complex and I didn't want to add too many policy questions to you. I didn't think that was fair and it would be a little hard to kind of dive through all of it. As we go through that, we will then present that information to Council. We will go through SEPA review, which will provide a community engagement time. We will formalize our on-site septic inspection program, present our master plan to Council, and then begin our CIP planning process. And then the community touch points is updates to the code and policy. That'll come in soon as we start to finalize a few of these code portions that we still have holes. And those will be provided in mailers and a website. And then again, once things have kind of been fine-tuned and finalized through boards and commissions and council, it'll go through SEPA to all stakeholders. And then when the extension occurs, we'll have an open house for that impacted neighborhood. So, question for you guys is, does the environmental board agree with the following? Our proactive direction for code revisions, a more proactive approach for on-site septic management, and proposed policy decisions for sewer extension. That is the end of my very long presentation. If you have questions or time to deliberate.
Thank you, Matt. We have a comment from Don first.
Hi, Matt. Don McWilliams here. So a couple questions for you. The inspections of these OSSs, who's going to be doing that? Is that a city responsibility or is that going to be bound on the homeowner?
It is bound on the homeowner. We manage it, but it would be a on-site septic, a certified inspector would be doing that work.
So that's a cost to the homeowner for that.
That is correct. And that is currently what is required, but we haven't required it for every septic system. We are going to do that for everyone. Just to make sure that they are working. Yes.
And then a clarification on your tiered approach. You said no new septic systems in those areas. What if I'm a big landowner and I'm inside one of those areas and I'm planning to build a home in the next 10 years and you're not going to get your sewer line there for another 40 years? Is there a means for me to build?
That is a good question. That's currently what's happening. And so that's why we want to at least put it on the capital improvement plan. So that way we can start to move forward with these areas that are currently, where development is currently not occurring and people can't remodel their homes. So at least provides a method where there currently is none.
Okay, thank you. And then one comment for you on your enforcement process. I would encourage you to use a escalating enforcement approach and avoid going to a monetary fine at any cost. So as long as the folks are working with you guys, I'd stay away from issuing fines.
Yeah, and that's typically how King County Board of Health or Board of Health works, and that's typically what we would be doing too. As long as people are communicating with us and making the effort, that is typically what we're looking for. But that's a very good comment.
All right, thanks, Don. I'm gonna go to Nancy. I do see that we have a hand up from Laura, so I'll probably go to her next, and we have Tom as well, or next after Nancy, and then Tom. Nancy, go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions about your funding alternatives and how you're prioritizing your capital program for this. So are you using the areas with the higher vehicle count where you think you might have problems to prioritize locations for extending sewer? Are you doing it on areas where they're requesting it so that they can get their homes built or remodels done?
I think it's both. I think we're going to have to evaluate. I think obviously the environment is the priority here if we are seeing a hot ticket. But I mean, we're talking about there's not a huge amount of homes in these areas. I mean, so if we add 1 or 2 to the CIP each biennium, then at least we have the process to move these forward. So yeah, I think the priority is ones where we're seeing and validating that there is a lot of failure in the area and people can't currently utilize their homes. And then secondary would be new development.
Okay, a question about your funding alternatives and, you have some of these where it's funded by city with no recuperations. Have you talked to the city attorney about that and potential gift of public funds?
That's why we have not evaluated these completely. These are just the options that are available to us. We are discussing how to do that to not make the other issue is that we don't want this to be an issue of proportionality where let's say it costs $5 million or some obnoxious amount for just a few homes to extend sewers. We want to be able to provide a reasonable option that isn't too expensive for the homeowner, but also isn't going to hurt our budget either. So that's kind of the next step is to figure out where we lie on those items.
That's why I'm suggesting you might want to talk to the city attorney about gifts of public funds and how this might apply.
Absolutely.
The other question I have for you is, given if it is funded by all the ratepayers in the city, or in the case of some of these, they're located in Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District, don't we have to communicate with all the residents that some of our ratepayer numbers, since it's impacting all of our utility bills along the way, if we are now paying for those kinds of sewers in areas that are unsewered?
Valid question. Yes, we would have to provide that information to the ratepayers. And to the Sammamish Plateau item, that will also be, that's a whole. There's not many that are in the Sammamish Plateau. A lot of those are luckily up on a hill where they're not in these critical areas. But they would be we would not be extending sewers into Sammamish Plateau's service area. They would be responsible. We would report that they're a priority for us to extend, but it's up to them to figure out a way to do that.
And I guess the last thing is as you're looking at this with the capacity charge requirements that go to King County, which are on the order of, I think I looked it up today, so much a month, pretty substantial amount, $70 a month going to King County. Are people aware that those costs are on top of paying for the capital and the side sewer that's required, and then also the utility rates? It's pretty substantial.
It is, yes.
So, okay, that's it.
Thank you, Nancy. We'll go to Laura next.
Can you guys hear me okay? Just assume you can unless you interrupt me. Hello again, nice to see you. I find this interesting and I kind of want to challenge your question number 3 about extending sewers. The time frame that you're mentioning is 10 to 40 years minimum, but these problems are happening now, and I think it's easy in Western society to assume that everything has to go through waste. But if you're talking so much about fecal matter, can we look into something more unconventional, like composting toilets, where we go around and pick up waste from them and, you know, do like formalized processing? Because I would think the processing cost versus the water use cost, there would be some way of working with those homeowners to make it in some ways, and even the power related, advantageous for them to use different types of toilets, and at least reduce some of that exposure. Also looking at constructed wetlands or other processes, it seems like the assumption that water digging up the ground using more built materials are involved. And if we could do some kind of pickup, I'm curious if you have alternatives that you've looked at. I know that it's not necessarily something done here in the US as often, but there are plenty of other parts of the world who are having to deal with not having sewers that have, you know, processes in place. So I'd be interested to hear you guys look into that more, but I think being a little unconventional might address some of these things sooner.
Thank you, Laura. We'll go to Tom next.
Thank you, Tom Anderson here. The decision criteria is about whether sewer is available. It's always with respect to 200 feet within the sewer main. What about a neighborhood or a portion of a neighborhood that's served by a private forced line? Is that a consideration at all? I'm not seeing any wording about that sort of installation in here. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was part of the looking at different ways of connecting sewers. Because right now we probably we still prefer gravity systems, but there are opportunities to look into pump systems, especially where we have no gravity. It's challenging to get gravity in our valley floor because it's very flat. There's sometimes obstructions to get from one point to the other. So yes, we are looking at extensions that doesn't necessarily require a gravity sewer because those can typically be very expensive.
Well, so I guess there's two parts to my question. One is, do you expect to add some nuance to the rules so that a property that is within 200 feet of one of those private systems would also be required to connect versus 200 feet of the public system? So that's a decision about whether they'd be required to connect something. And then secondly, would you support systems like that to help reach further with less cost as far as the city's infrastructure goes?
So in your second question, yes, we would. We are entertaining that and trying to figure out developing the standards to accommodate that, because there's additional challenges and costs for those types of systems. But we are definitely pursuing that in cases where we don't have any other options. But I do not know. I'm not sure how many private systems are in the city and how much that would impact our residents. So I'll have to look into that one. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next we'll go to Anne.
Thank you. I thought Dawn was going to be next. I misheard. So thank you so much. This is Anne. Great presentation, Matt, and I'm so happy you guys are looking at doing these changes. And I'm with Laura. If we're getting fecal matter into a salmon-bearing creek and Lake Sammamish, which leads out to Puget Sound, it does make a lot of sense to act as quickly as possible. And one other thing that I thought of that is outside of the box that could put less pressure on the system would be converting the gray water into flushing toilets, or just taking the gray water out as irrigation, which would both save water and then also put less into the system. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Matt, this is Jamie Finch. My comments would be, I think, one, appreciate this approach. I think at the highest level, it makes sense. I really do think a lot of the more structured feedback will need to come once we actually, one, have all of the readings back from these creeks. I think that's ultimately like understanding the problem. So I feel like that piece will definitely be helpful, as well as some of the things just around costs and our proximity of a lot of these properties to existing sewer lines and the difficulty of getting them there. I am curious whether we have this one solution of extending sewer to these properties, whether that's always going to be like an economically an option really in some cases. So I do wonder if we need to be thinking about some backup solutions. I don't know enough to know what those are, but I just imagine there's going to be certain situations where it's just the cost is going to be prohibitive, and you need to think about how else we could support those types of properties. So I think that, but I think at the highest level, I'm in support of the direction that this is headed. I just think a lot of the details around costs, how those costs will be borne, the existing fecal content of some of our streams, those will be, I'm looking forward to commenting once we have some of that together, as I think that'll truly be where we have a more fleshed out plan to take a look at.
Fair enough.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Cameron.
Thank you, Jamie. Matt, Cameron Fisher. Just going to your timing and next steps slide. Is there any months, days, years associated with that slide, that arrow?
So our goal is to get this done in this year. So this is a year program.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anne, I see you have another question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Ann Newcomb again. Sorry, I remembered another part that I was going to mention. So I'm just curious if you're taking climate change into account as you're going through this, because it's changing our water in two ways. We're going to be having less water, droughts, and then we're going to be having a whole bunch of water all at once, just like is happening in California. I'm guessing that's going to be happening more and more here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just seems like that would be affecting this whole system as well.
It is, and that's part of the reason why we want to have this proactive approach of looking at not our septic systems as a whole, because it gets a little complicated and we get a little lost. But if we look at just systematically looking at the areas where they're going to be the most impacted by flooding and these issues, then it's a lot more reasonable thing to evaluate and really complete.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. All right, do we have any other questions or comments for Matt at this time? Okay, well then, I may try to summarize. We haven't done that for a lot of the other sections, but I think it might be helpful for this one. I didn't hear any objections to the direction that the city is headed. I think there's a lot of interest in some of the details as well as the timeline for this process. I think it certainly seems to be a topic that the board has a lot of interest in learning more as the project progresses. So yeah, I think that, but in general, didn't sense any negative sentiment and some positive sentiment to the direction that the city is taking with the current process. Any comments or amendments to that? All right.
I would just add that I did hear that the board's asking for you guys to look for alternate options as well to traditional gravity systems or sewer systems in general.
Yeah, thank you, Don. That's a great thought. All right, I think with that then, thank you very much, Matt. I think that, unless there was anything else you had or needed from this, I think we're all squared away. We can't see your email.
Oh, sorry about that. I gotta stop sharing. There we go.
All right, well, with that, then I will go to reports, which I think Stacy has some updates for us.
Great. Yeah, just a couple of updates, announcements. One thing I neglected to share at the beginning of the meeting is we did put, I don't have one, but that's okay. On the underside of your name card, we put a little cheat sheet for voting. It's the pretty formal Robert's rules, so we may want to amend that over time as we put into practice. We could have used that earlier today, but we do anticipate having some policies, even next meeting with the letter to council coming before you all. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a cheat sheet on that process. And then just run through a few updates. Capital improvement plan, the staff have a proposed process and timeline for our 2-year update of the 6-year plan, which is happening this year, and also encompasses the TIP. There are some internal and council discussions happening right now to formalize that process and timeline, but do expect that the board will be engaged multiple times over the spring. I've put a placeholder on your calendar for a potential event in February, but I will confirm that over the coming weeks and update your calendars accordingly, as well as keep you updated on the process for the CIP. I just wanted to make sure you're all aware that we've been working with a couple of student interns from Gibson Egg. Was hoping at some point they can come and present to you all, but our agendas are getting very, very full, but we'll try and make that happen before the end of the school year. Wanted to just highlight a few things that they've been working on. They developed a curriculum around green homes for elementary age children as a way to engage students in the Climate Action Challenge. And then have that information taken home to parents and guardians. They're working with a teacher at IBE to hopefully get into the classroom this spring and present the curriculum to the students and test it out with the teacher. They've also been doing some research on heat pump campaigns around the country, as well as Canada, to help us figure out ways to kind of spruce up our marketing. They're organizing and hosting a youth workshop on climate vulnerability. We held a training with the student Rotary group on Monday to prepare those students for running a workshop at the garage later this month. That will be an opportunity to talk with the youth about what actions they think the city and community should be taking around climate preparedness. And then the other main project they're working on is helping to coordinate a sustainability fair, which I think I mentioned at previous meetings. We are planning to host in April at Pickering Barn. The Gibson X students will be really thinking around helping with the marketing as well as vendor recruitment. So a lot of really cool stuff they're working on, really great students, and hope that you all have a chance to meet them at an upcoming meeting. Another update I wanted to mention is that the city was successful in partnership with other Eastside cities on a community energy efficiency program to expand our heat pump program. That will provide free installs for a limited number of low-income households, continue our work with affordable housing, and then also to offer some market rate incentives. We are planning to launch that component of the program by March. We also just applied for another grant with the Eastside cities that would expand upon all of those items, as well as add a workforce development component. We're going to start adding in workforce development to pretty much every grant we're applying for, just recognizing that we need to really build the workforce for HVAC and renewable energy. Next update is the interlocal agreement with the Eastside Climate Partnership has been approved by 4 of the 5 cities. It will go to Kirkland City Council, I believe, next week. And then it is already in effect with signatures of 2 cities, but will be fully in effect with all 5 cities within the coming weeks. That's the interlocal agreement that allows us to more closely share resources. We're planning to bring on a shared staff person that will sit at Bellevue to help run a lot of these programs that we're coordinating on. Also just makes it easier for us to manage contracts together, go after grants together, et cetera. January 30th, we are hosting a sustainability open house with the mayor. I think I mentioned this at the December meeting. We are going to have that at Gibson Hall from 6:30 to 8 p.m. We are planning to have some very brief presentations from staff and the mayor. I think people for climate action will make some remarks. We'd also like to have a member or members of the environmental board do some opening remarks and possibly introduce the mayor to share with the community who you all are, what you do, what you're planning to work on this year. We're also going to have some tables set up at the event and do kind of a call to action for the last half hour. So ask attendees to sign up for a campaign or sign up to volunteer on one of our programs or bring in items for Recology, hard to recycle items for Recology. So just wanted to get a quick show of hands, and I'll also send out an email about this, but see who is interested, available to participate on January 30th. If necessary, if more than 5 of you will be there, we'll have a special meeting. But we'd love to have some representation from the environmental board as well as a speaker from the board to share some remarks. So just folks are aware.
What time?
It's 6:30.
What time would it be?
6:30 to 8 will be the program, or actually 6:30 to about 7:15, and then we'll have some Q&A and then do that kind of call to action and some mingling after that. I will say, we don't know if we're gonna get 5 people showing up or if we'll pack the house. Kind of hard to tell how much the community might come out, but hoping that sustainability will gain a lot of traction.
How is it being, is there like much of a comms plan or kind of what's that aspect of it?
We'll be doing through most of the city's regular channels, the Insider, probably a note from the mayor is her event, social media, but also would look to you all to promote and send it out to PCA, and we can do it through the Trails Club. So we'll send it out through quite a few avenues. General, potentially interested if you're available, just a quick show of hands so I can see if we probably need to make it a special meeting, I would anticipate. And I'll send out a email about this and take a solicitation. Okay, great, thanks. Oh, and I should mention, we've had some conversation about whether or not it would be a hybrid virtual event. I think that'll be a challenge for this type of event, but we are planning to have it filmed so that it would be available for the community members to view after. Last thing I'll just mention is the schedule updates. As we've discussed, February 1st will be a special meeting. We moved up our regular meeting by 1 week to accommodate the Title 18 schedule. We'll be really focused on that meeting on finalizing a letter that I can submit to council the next day, hopefully. We have a lot of other potential items for that meeting that we might turn into written reports or maybe just have another small agenda item because I think we're gonna really wanna focus on Title 18. So we'll adjust that schedule as needed. And then you do have a tentative hold on your calendars for February 16th, another special meeting. That would be a CIP summit. But I will let you know as soon as that is confirmed one way or the other. So potentially 2 special meetings in February, no regular meeting on the 8th. Those are the main highlights, I think, for the agenda updates. We have a lot lot. So we're gonna just continue to kind of adjust things, and then I might move items just into written reports, just to kind of make sure we can cover everything that we've identified as a priority for this year. Those are my updates.
Thank you, Stacy. And I don't know if you're planning on sending a separate email, but any more guidance that you want to provide now for the Title 18 comments that the board, I think it's the 24th that you need to provide by, right?
I think this was really the suggestion of Stephen at the last meeting, was coming to that meeting with a draft letter. So if you all can just think about that as you're preparing your comments, to send to me, so that I can kind of drop them into a draft letter. So just to keep that in mind, that our goal is to have a draft letter that we're making some minor revisions, figuring out who agrees with what sections. Are there areas that there's consensus agreement? Are there areas that we might want to describe that members of the board have differing opinions? Maybe taking a look back at the December meeting packet that included some of our previous letters to council and just how those were structured, and council found those fairly easy to follow. So I don't have any other specific guidance, but can also check in with Jamie and Don, see if folks need some further direction.
But to be clear, people will submit their comments, and then it'll be kind of your job to synthesize that into a letter. So it's not like they need to follow that letter necessarily with their comments, but it's their comments hopefully should fit into that sort of format.
Yes, so as much as you can write out the comment as the way you would want it presented to council, compared to just saying, well, I have concerns about this section. I think as much as you can write it in the language that would go into a letter to council, the faster I can turn it around.
Great, that's all right, well, I think with that, all of the reports are complete. And then is there any other business and announcements from Stacy or any of the board members? All right, well, I think that we're adjourned then. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Ann.
I think this is a little.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Like the